COVID-19 had clear effects on our everyday lives. Soon after COVID hit us, our school system was closed for what was expected to be only a few weeks. Little did we know, that was going to be the last day of 8th grade. In this episode, we will be discussing the different ways that COVID-19 affected media, and what that meant for our everyday life.
You're listening to WJHS 91.5 The Eagle. Welcome to Media in the Making, a podcast where we look at the evolution of media from the 1600s all the way to present day 2022. In this podcast series, we ask, how have different forms of media evolved and changed culture? Media in the Making, where media and culture are always changing. Now, let's take a step back in time.
For the remainder of the year, we would have to learn online. Many school systems used a site called Zoom, which is a website that is fundamentally identical to Skype. Teachers would hold their lectures over these Zoom calls. Students were all on video call but had to be on mute unless directly asked a question or had a question themselves. It was very difficult for us to learn new material. Learning material worked on barely progressed from the day school got shut down. Quarantine made me feel behind when I started my freshman year that next fall. What I know from talking to other students is that they shared the same thoughts. During the pandemic, schools were not the only ones to be using websites such as Zoom or Google Meet. People stayed active by using challenges made during the pandemic, such as the C10 Do 10 challenge. Marketing also changed during the pandemic. Since everyone was at home, they were spending a lot more time online. Companies understood this and used it to their advantage. Advertisers on Facebook changed their marketing from Wednesdays at 11 a.m. and between the hours of 1 and 2 p.m., which is when they marketed pre-pandemic, to Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays between 10 and 11 a.m. during the pandemic. Other companies such as Instagram and Twitter adapted their marketing techniques so their ads would get the most attention.
I watched a lot of television and played video games often. I was already acclimated to online social interaction and talked to friends online using an app called Discord. Quarantine gave me more time to talk to friends online because people were generally supposed to stay inside in order to prevent the spread of COVID. Since there was so little to do at home, talking on the phone was one of the few social things that you could do. When our school was in quarantine, I would often play video games while in class, yet I was still able to get better grades than usual since we rarely learned new things. After the school year ended and the next year was coming up, I had to look at how my dad's work was operating to have an idea of how my school was going to look. Enough people at his workplace got quarantined to send people online for 2 weeks. This foreshadowed that my year was going to be unpredictable. This was the case for all companies and businesses across the country, and when at home, people spent more time using media. There was roughly a 60% increase in Netflix watch time, and their subscriptions almost doubled. Social media engagement went up by 61% just in the first wave. Users also spent around 90% more time using apps to create and edit. Social media was one of the only ways to access the outside world, and it was contaminated by the spread of misinformation. It was so prevalent that many social media sites, including Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, began flagging or removing posts that were not based on fact. The public was not able to escape the misinformation. The only way for everyone at home to see the outside world was to look through this intricate web of misinformation. People panicked, especially those with underlying anxiety disorders. Some even thought that the pandemic was going to be the end of the world. People began buying out all of the store supplies, clearing shelves day after day. This became known as pandemic shopping.
The pandemic raised awareness for false information and taught the public how to avoid it. It made companies like Instagram and Facebook aware of the spread of false information and forced them to do something about it. The public's usage of media developed, and people's online presence flourished. Through all of the pandemic, there was a sense of togetherness. A common phrase was, "together at home," which I believe is a good way of putting it. Media in the Making is brought to you by WJHS 91.5 and the Eagle Tech Academy Mass Media class. Media in the Making, teaching you about the evolution of media throughout history and its effects on culture. For more from the students, this podcast series is on 91.5's website, wjhs915.org. Thank you for joining us.